Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move to the last session of track 2, because there's a lot happening afterwards on track 1. But as far as we are concerned, it's the final session, and definitely by no means the least session of track 2, because we will consider the European Statistical Classification as linked open data. And we'll look more specifically at the successful collaboration between Eurostat and the Publications Office of the EU. To do so, I am very happy to welcome two colleagues from both sides. Christine Laaboudi-Spoiden, who is a statistical assistant at Eurostat, and Denis Dechandon, who's head of the reference data and style guide sector for the Publications Office. Welcome, Christine, welcome, Denis, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Florence, and thank you very much to the Endos team for having us with you today. It's not the right screen, I fear. So anyway, we want to explain you shortly the collaboration we started some years ago with Eurostat, and to show you the end result, which is the publication and dissemination of statistical classifications as linked open data.
Can you, I'm sorry, yes, as you were saying, this doesn't seem to be the right screen. Can you maybe share or find a way of sharing the right one? The correct screen with your presentation?
Or shall I take over?
Maybe there's a technical problem. Your end, Christine?
No, it's coming.
We've just seen
lovely.
Something. Yes,
Thank
there
you.
we are. Thank you.
So basically, we have structured a little bit this presentation into blocks. The first one will be to explain you shortly what we do at the Publications Office around reference data. Then explain you shortly which semantic applications, the platform we use to create, update, and disseminate reference data. And then we'll go directly into the technical details and explanations about the transformation of the set classifications. So basically, this collaboration builds on the quite large and extensive experience of the Publications Office with multilingual reference data. So Christine, if you can move a little bit to the next slide, thank you. And in the experience of the Publications Office in using semantic technologies and in disseminating, as I said, multilingual reference data. Otherwise, we built on the existing corporate reference data management policy at the Commission, meaning that in this framework, the Publications Office came up 2 years ago with a service offer. And when I say service offer, I mean basically, first of all, the creation and update of reference data sets where we provide support and guidance to colleagues in the Commission, but even beyond, actually, because we get similar requests from colleagues in all institutions and EU agencies. Otherwise, we provide access to semantic applications to interested colleagues to create and update their reference data sets. While we're talking about data sets and reference data, they have to be used and reused, and that's why we disseminate them on various platforms. And as reference data have to be well known about, we disseminate information and we promote what we have, so reference data sets and data sets. And as the tools and applications we provide are quite new, we provide training sessions more and more intensively and tutorials. And last but not least, for all other requests regarding reference data, we're there to support colleagues. So we have a kind of customer service, so to say. Now, if we come back to what I said 1 minute ago regarding applications and websites and platforms, next slide, please. I was talking mainly about Workbench, the semantic application we use to create and update multilingual reference data. Then about ShowVoc, another application built on Workbench, actually, to disseminate data sets and to visualize reference data in multiple ways. Otherwise, I said that we disseminate reference data, and mainly we do it on the open data portal called Data Europa EU. We heard of it many times the last days, but as well on our website, so as to say, the EU vocabulary website, the one we maintain and use quite intensively. And there you can find all what we do at the OP in terms of reference data sets. Otherwise, if human beings can access datasets on EU vocabularies, machines can retrieve them from the SPARQL endpoint we have linked to our triple store called Sailor. And everywhere on the slide, you can find links to reach all the platforms and applications if you're interested. But services, corporate services, Christine, in our case, what does it mean concretely?
So Eurostat is the owner of the main European statistical classification, and between the statistical classification, we have set up a correspondence table between Eurostat classification, but also between Eurostat and United Nations classification. And we are also delivering the standard code list that are used in dissemination as a dimension in the dataset in the Eurostat reference statistical database. We have a database called CODET, which contain concept and definition, and different statistical data catalog, such as methodologies or standards. So before, our structural metadata were disseminated in a Oracle relational database, and we decided to innovate the way we are disseminating our metadata, and with the objective to make the resources fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And so in that perspective, we applied open standards and format. And in the first approach, we converted our classification correspondence table code list and coded into SDMX, which is the format for exchanging statistical data. And then in the second approach, we transform the Eurostat structural metadata, such as the classification, the correspondence table, and the metadata catalog in link open data. So to move towards link open data, we use the tool offered by the publication office. At first, for the transformation of the structural metadata, so we use functionalities in Workbench for converting the structure content into RDF triples, and for representing the metadata inside our classification, we follow the XCOS. And XCOS is an extension of SCOS for representing statistical classification. And in fact, we ensure an interoperability between the SDMX classes and properties and the SCOS and XCOS classes and properties. And so the second aspect, the most important one, is the dissemination. We expose the structural metadata in the triple store of Cellar and in ShowVoc. So the dataset are human readable in ShowVoc and machine readable in Cellar and in ShowVoc, because both make available a SPARQL endpoint. So the state of the play of the LOD dissemination for Eurostat. So we have disseminated our main classification. So the classification, they are presented by a statistical domain, and under each statistical domain, we have the classification family, such as the combined nomenclature, the NACE, the PRODCOM, the statistical, the NUTS, the territorial units. And we have also metadata catalog, the business statistic manual, a catalog of standards approved by the ESS, the European System of Statistics. And then we have now one specialized glossaries about ESSS quality. So our objective is to render our resources fair. So that means that each classification family is represented by a namespace. So for instance, for the NACE, we are using the namespace data.europa.eu X2. So all the versions of the NACE are published under this namespace. And we have one identifier for each version of the classification. So here we have the NACE2, and one identifier, persistent identifier for each resource in the classification. The data are represented by rich metadata in Xcos, so they are findable. The data set are interoperable via the correspondence table, but for example, we also have a link to the EU legislation, to the legal act setting up the classification. And then the resources, they are machine readable via the Sparkle endpoint and human readable in Shovok, but also actionable because each persistent identifier resolve to a metadata record, to the description of the classification item, for example. And the data set, the classification, the correspondence table, they are reusable in open format, such as RDF or CSV. So the benefits of linking and querying the classification. So the first objective is here you have a screenshot representing the link between the statistical classification at the UN level and at the EU level and the national level. So for example, the NACE is a European classification of activities derived from the UN classification, the ISIC. But for the NACE, there are derived classification at the national level. So the purpose of link open data is to link the classification between the different levels. And one example, the NACE revision 2 is a link to the ISIC, and the ISIC is stored in the Caliper platform from the FAO. And the CPA, the classification of product by activities, is also a link to the CPC stored in Caliper. And we can query both classification, Eurostat classification in Cellar and UN classification in Caliper via the Sparkle endpoint, and retrieve the federated data from both classification. And one important aspect of linking is that so the resource are the source and the target, they are represented by a persistent identifier, but the context, the semantic context of the source and of the target are always available in a human or a machine, because the URI is actionable. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you. And we already have a question, and don't hesitate to send more. So once again, final time for track 2, endorse 2023, or the QR code if you still have one question while we have our two speakers with us. What are the future perspectives within the linking of statistical classifications, particularly, for instance, if we look at member states or other examples that may come to your mind?
Yes, there are some member states already offering LOD statistical classification, such as France or the Netherlands. And we are talking between us for improving the link open data presentation of our classification and for linking our classification.
And you're reaching out to other member states to encourage them?
Yes. We are setting up a discussion group among us on this topic.
Denis, would you like to add anything maybe on that front?
Well, linked to what Christine said, we have been contacted by some national institutes for statistics, actually, and they had some questions regarding not only the technologies we use, but some extra tools we have for the mappings to align the classifications, so to build the links you were mentioning. So this is most likely incoming, seen from outside, because we are not in the statistical domain, so as to say directly, just support.
But very concrete next steps, definitely. Well, thank you very much, both, for joining us. And I wish you a nice rest of the day. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.